Well, greetings, folkaroos. After a long, long wait, it is now almost 2 weeks after my 21st birthday, and I'm finally back with part two of the birthday special video, which will go over my best games that I thought were impressive at the time from 2022. So these games will obviously be a little bit higher in quality than the ones from 2021, but there are still definitely learning moments and laughing moments and all sorts of moments that you get from like advanced to beginner and low intermediate chess. So without further ado, let's hop into this with a game that I played literally about an hour after it turned to be 2022. I played this after I watched the ball drop with my sisters on New Year's Eve. And it was a slammer, I'll tell you that much. Let's see. I don't think I've ever used that phrase before. It's a slammer. Well, you'll see what that means. So it starts off with a French defense, which is like e4, e6. Black's goal is to play d5 and challenge this pawn in the center. And that is exactly what happens. Black plays d5, and now White has a few choices of how to deal with this. The most common response is to play this. You can also take and do that. You can also develop a knight. You could do a ton of things. It's like the opening. You have a lot of choices. But the choice I go with, and the choice that I still play today, is e5. And the main move in this position for Black is pawn to c5, with the idea of undermining the structure and forcing White to commit this pawn to c3, making the development of this knight a little bit more awkward. That's the whole point of the French defense. But what my opponent in this game does is play c6, which is just simply not the right idea, because it doesn't do anything to challenge this pawn center, and White doesn't have to commit the pawn to c3 now. White can play like knight f3, bishop d3, and delay the development of this knight before they see what the point of this move is for Black. And now Black has the same problem they wanted to cause White in the main line. They cannot put this knight on c6 and pressure the pawns. And this is like the main idea of the French defense, to like try to challenge this structure. So we get knight f3 and h6. Like, Black simply just played e6 and probably was like, oh, I'm playing the French defense, I must be playing a mainline, but you didn't know like any move beyond the second move. It's actually fairly common at this level of chess, but I also didn't know like the most optimal way to deal with people like this. So I just developed my pieces, which is a fairly good way of actually dealing with this. So you just develop pieces and try to maintain your structure in the center, a good space control, and you're just going to have a better position if they're not following openings. Like, openings are established for a reason. So queen b6, and what's funny about this is that queen b6 is normally played after c5 and knight c6. It's kind of like what Black does, like when they play against the London system, if I can just show you that. So Black will often have games where they play c5 and then knight c6 and then queen b6 to just pressure the heck out of this pawn here. And that's kind of like what Black should do ideally in the French. But queen b6 first is very ineffective because White can defend the pawn in a multitude of ways. And also there's like this cool move. Well, no, that's actually not in this line, but in some lines you can play a3. And if queen takes, there's like ways to trap the queen by like moving the knight up here and here, or like something like that. I'm not too versed on the French defense. It's not one of my specialty openings, but I know that queen b6 before knight c6 and after c6 rather than c5 is not good. So castles, knight to e7. This is normally a good move in the French. c4, just cracking away at this pawn center. Then knight f5, and I take it. And this looks good because you're like, oh, Haley, you're splitting the pawns. Why is this not good? And the reason this is not good is because the recommended move by the computer here is c5, just blocking out the dark squared bishop, forcing the queen to go back. And the thing about the French defense that's very commonly memed on by the chess community is what's called the French bishop. Playing e6 permanently stunts the development of this bishop, and if White gets a pawn here, this makes that even harder. And also blocks this bishop in. So with one pawn move, I can send the queen back and prevent both bishops from developing ideally. And this knight really has nothing to do. Like if it reroutes, it can't go here. It can't really do this and that because it will be taken, and it can't go here. So this knight is super ineffective. It's not actually doing anything for black. So white should not waste resources like their developed bishop to take it, because now black removes kind of a problem piece from their position, and also the c4 pawn is just simply hanging, and you can no longer play pawn to c5. But I played d5. Look, this is actually a calculated pawn sacrifice for me. I played this, kind of forcing black to make a decision about what they're going to do about this pawn, and if they took, I was going to go here, because after this and this is like a big tempo on the queen, which will happen a little bit later in the game. So we get knight to d7, and what I should have done again was focus on blocking out the bishops, and went here. Like, this is just an absolutely killer move, because you just cut the circulation of black's position. But I play knight to d4 because I'm looking to target this pawn. And black takes. And like I said, the huge tempo on the queen, boom, knight takes. And here, and I go back to e3. But the best move here is this. And that looks like a free knight to an untrained eye. But if you take, there's that. Just winning the queen, and also attacking the rook, but you're not going to take the rook. And if you don't take, like, you know, if black defends it somehow, then you play a4, just locking your knight in, and it's a pretty dominant position. But knight e3 does fork the pawns, but it allows that to be taken, and it also allows the knight to, like, activate itself to b6, which is a better square, freeing up the development of the French bishop. Knight e takes e5, and what we have here, folks, are called what I like to call star-crossed knights. I think I may have mentioned this before. It's because the knights are stuck defending each other. They, like, really care about each other, but they're just stuck, and, like, their fate is tied to the other's fate. So if one of them dies, the other one will probably perish. Queen to f6 gets out of the threat of playing rook to e1, pinning it to the king. So I play rook e1 anyway, and after king to d8, we have bishop to e3. The impressive part, the sort of flashy part, is coming up pretty soon, trust me. Pawn to g6 attacks the knight, I go back, and my opponent plays the innocuous-looking move, bishop to c5. Blundering the game to the move, knight to e4. And what this move does is it attacks the bishop and the queen. And you may be like, Haley, sure, that's just a fork. Like, black's gonna move the queen, and then this is gonna happen, right? Like, that's just an even trade. Why is that so good? Like, black is up a point of material. What do you have? Well, notice what happened after the queen took. When the queen took, it set up this. If the knight were to move, the bishop would take the queen. If it was a check. And there happens to be two checks in this position with the knight. This one and this one. You can't play this one, because then just queen takes knight. That's not as good. But you play this one, revealing an attack on the queen and checking the king, sacrificing your knight to take the queen. And that is what happened in the game. And I just picked up the queen. We have pawn to b6, the bishop goes back, a5, he's chasing my bishop back, I just deploy it to attack the rook. The rook goes to f8, and I take. And this is a rather long process of just converting this very winning endgame. I take pawns, I check, and I should have invaded with my queen a little bit quicker, just to, like, cut the king's escape a little bit, but I wanted to, like, clarify the pawn structure, maybe trade a pair of rooks, so to get down into more of an endgame that's more clearly won for me, but I eventually do that by playing this, setting up checkmate, forcing black to take, simplifying another pair of pieces until we have rook and queen versus rook and bishop there. And now I pin the pawn and play a3. Boom. And then I have another flashy finish to this game, if you can see it. Queen to e6. Rook takes b5. Sacrificing the rook to simplify into this endgame, which is obviously winning. And there you have the New Year's Day, or morning, special. Flash forward about 4 months to April 14th, 2022, where I was back at college and I was playing this game. Now, this game is a real special one in my memory because it was probably one of the only instances of me getting a horrible, horrible position after the opening and early middle game, but then absolutely refusing to say die and coming back and winning. And we'll see how that happened. It was an imperfect process, but it definitely was one of my more prouder moments from my early chess days. So e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and we have a Ruy Lopez. Now, this opening is like the ocean. There are so many variations. You could play a6, you could play knight f6, you could play d5, you could play d6, you could play f5, you could play bishop e7, you could play bishop c5. There's like infinity different variations here there's like, you could play this, you could play d6, like there's so many variations, and black decides to play d6, which is called the old Steinitz defense. Now, the thing about the old Steinitz defense is that it makes no direct challenge onto my center. Like, for instance, if black were to have played this move, attacking the integrity of my center, I would have played this, just responding to that and improving my structure. But based on what black did, not pressuring my center at all, I can play c3 to build to take the center for myself. And bishop to d7, castles. And after a couple more moves, I play d4. And this is basically how the Ruy Lopez goes, in like very simplified terms. If black puts a challenge on your center, you have to sort of deal with it. But if black doesn't put a challenge on your center and just wastes time chasing the bishop back, then you can build your own attack on the center with c3 and d4, and oftentimes you'll put this knight on d2 and rotate it either out here or here, here, and here. Just ignore my terrible arrow drawing. So you have queen to e7, which is a bit of a strange move, d5. What would have been better to do here is to just not commit this pawn like this and ask for some trades, but to rather just develop this knight out and not exactly rotate it over here because black is intending to castle queenside, so the knights over here wouldn't actually do much. So now you would play d5, and because you chase the knight back here, and then after this and this, white has a nice bind on the center and is going to be able to launch a nice opposite side attack on this king. Actually, the computer suggests you play b4 right away. Like, this game might get a little saucy. So d5 is a bit of an overcommission this early in the game. So knight a7, and I play knight to h4. This move was kind of a one-move threat to like go here and attack the queen. So one of these more beginner moments that are mixed into these games from this time period. So bishop takes a4, and I take with the queen. I wanted to activate my queen with a check. And instead of just blocking on d7, my opponent plays b5 and blunders the pawn on a6. And white now has a very, very comfortable position. So queen to d8. My opponent is probably desperately trying to trade the queens because my threat was to maybe go here and pick off the rook if the queen was just hanging around on the 7th rank. So bishop e3 just double attacks the knight. So what does black do? Black tries to guard the knight by the pawn, forgetting about passant, as many beginners do. But that cleared up the space for the queen to go to c7 and guard the knight, so at least just take, and take the pawn. And I am now up 2 pawns. How the hell do I get a worse position? You may be asking, how, like, this looks really good. How do you mess this up? You'll see. It happens very soon. Knight to d2, just standard developing moves. I'm like, all right, I'm just going to play from a pretty good position this whole time. I have some nice pawns over here that I can use to advance on the queen side. So I go here, here. And if I wanted to continue this queenside pawn advance, I should have played a4. Look, if I was playing this game nowadays, I might play a4, a5, and then look for a queen trade like this to just get these pawns right here, which are like ridiculously powerful. Like the pawns will just overwhelm black. But I play the other queenside pawn advance, c4, which is horrible because rook to b8. And the move c4 cuts the queen's retreat along this diagonal. The rooks control both of these files, and you can't go here or here, so the queen is trapped. And I sacrifice it for the rook and play b5. Keep in mind these pawns will come in handy for my comeback later. So queen b6, just sort of blockading the advance. Black is like, all right, there's no way that they're going to come back from this. So a4, I'm trying to like kick the queen out of there. Maybe my idea is to play knight b3. I should probably be rotating my knight in at some point if I want to have any chance at winning this game. Queen to d4. Now, the reason why this move is a blunder that goes back to equality is because the move knight to b3. And if the queen goes back to b6, for instance, then a5 is now possible, and these pawns are going to become quite scary for black. A queen and a rook sometimes can't like challenge a bunch of pawns that are that closely together. They can support each other push. So queen d4, and I do the knight rotation that I should have done a move or two earlier. Now, and I attack the queen that way, and it just goes back and embeds itself in c5. And for some reason, I blunder my a4 pawn, and now I play knight to b3. So the best move in the position I only played after I lost one of my pawns that were the only ways for me to get back into the scheme. Knight there, and then I trade the rooks because I was like, oh, I'm getting a nice attack on the queen here. I have the nice a file open, and I'm maybe going to push these pawns at some point. So knight to e1. The point of knight to e1 was to rotate the knight into the position like this or like this. I just wanted to get my knight active in the most effective way possible, but I did it in the wrong way. The computer wanted me to go to d2. Why? I don't exactly know. But king to g7, knight c2, the knight rotation continues. Bishop to d8. My opponent's kind of just keeping an eye on this square for now, maybe stopping any knight from coming here, although I don't know why I would put it there. f3, just blocking this knight from coming forward. Queen to b6, check, and I get more active. My goal is to come over here at some point, even though the computer wanted me to tuck myself away. Knight h5, not really sure what that does, so I just go here, attack the queen, and white is back in the game. White is 100% back in the game, but they need to do this. I need to do this super carefully. But the problem is I don't do this carefully in the game. I play knight to b4, sure, which is the best move after bishop c7, knight d5, and then instead of trading the knights, I take the bishop and then play knight to a5. I don't really know what the point of that move was, but knight to e6, pawn to b6. I guess the point of that was to play pawn to b6 and have the knight guarding the pawn here. So I chased the queen back. Pawn to b7 was the best move in this position because what it does is, like, if the queen goes here, then you're going to play rook to a8 and promote. Like, that is the idea, right? But I go king to e2 because at this moment, for some reason, I decide I should bring my king up, even though there is literally no way for my king to join the pawn side attack over there, like the queen side pawn attack over there. So knight c5 and c7. That is the critical move in this position, and I am so close to just breaking through this blockade. Rook to a7. I'm trying to set up some sort of push. Maybe I'm trying to, like, I don't know, do that or something at some point if the knight moves. Like, I don't know what I'm trying to do here. Knight d7. And like I said, I don't convert this cleanly because I play the disastrous move b7. Like, that just hangs the c7 pawn. I was just kind of feeling myself here. I was like, oh, I'm coming back nicely. I was getting super hype, and I just pushed the pawn up, and I was like, oh, crap, I blundered. So king to d. I'm like, all right, might as well get the king more involved after I blundered like my only winning piece. And now there are moves like queen b6, which can attack the rook and pressure this. But he goes queen to b8, which is a blunder because of the move knight c6, guarding the rook and guarding this, the promotion square, and attacking the queen. So the queen has to sacrifice itself for the pawn to stop it from promoting. Knight c5 check. Or the queen has to sacrifice itself for the rook, sorry. Knight c5 check, and by the way, after that whole attack, I now still have to convert a dead drawn endgame. Like, this is not over yet. Let's see how I do it. So I bring my king over. My idea is to, like, walk in like this, because the knight was kind of stopping me from doing some stuff like that before. King b4, king f6, and I walk the king up. My goal is to probably land it on the square. King e7, and I go there. Here, check, and here. And I find the move that gives me a small advantage that I use to convert the endgame. Here, knight takes e5. A deflection sacrifice to deflect the pawn away from guarding the knight. And it is still not over, because after g5, I need to find the right technique. I need to use the f-pawn as a decoy to get into the setup over here. And after that, I win. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this pawn, and I'm just going to push. And if it goes here, I'm just going to run here and push. Like, it's just over. Anyways, let us get into our last game of 2022. This one was from a few months after that, on August 24th, 2022. And it was a bit of a shorter game. But you'll see here that my skill level is slowly improving, as it kind of should be. So e4, c6, and we have a pretty rare variation of the Caro-Kann called the Breyer system, or the Breyer variation, which is where instead of d4, taking the full center, which is the most common move, you play d3, solidifying this. Now d5, e takes d5, and this kind of looks like an exchange Caro-Kann, but where white has their pawn on d3 rather than d4. And a lot of the same principles apply. Like here, just develop the knights, develop the bishop, play e6. This is a ultra common move in the Caro-Kann, just getting this light squared pawn structure, because the point is, most times if you get attacked over here, you will take this knight, because you have restructured on these squares, so it would be really hard for that bishop to find a place to be effective. h3, but in this position, it's kind of not that good, because after taking, there is one developed piece here, and black is kind of at a space disadvantage, and white's about to castle, and white can develop really quickly, like after knight f6. It's just a minor inaccuracy, it's not terrible. But bishop d6, standard move. Like, I'm just playing a lot of, like, standard moves here, not necessarily moves from, like, a line, but just standard moves. Knight f6, bishop to b2. This move just activates in the long diagonal, keeps an eye on this knight. But right now it is guarded by the queen, so I don't have to worry about doubling my pawn structure, which is why I am able to castle. What I should have done in this position was play e5, seeing that they put their bishop here, e5, blocking it out, and maybe building up for d4, just absolutely shutting the door on this bishop. Basically for good, because there is no e-pawn to poke away. So after castles, my opponent also castles, rook to e8, and now I play e5. And I'm maybe ready to play this at some point, and maybe get my knight into the square. Like, the point of the game right now, the point of the entire middle game for me right now, is to block out this bishop and maybe transfer my knight inactively. That is my goal. a4, e5. I block the advance. I do not want this pawn to encroach on my knight over here. So queen to d2, we have d4. This move shuts out the bishop. It also makes the queen's life a bit difficult. This is also kind of tough. Like, the queen can't go over here at all. And I can play even moves like this at some point during this to blockade this. queen back to d1. So my opponent basically is like, oh, this move was bad, so now they go back to d1. So this is just really bad for my opponent because they basically allowed me to improve my position while they kept the same exact position. Like if we go back a move, they have the same position, but now my pawn is in a better place. Like, I just don't understand the logic there. So I play knight to d5, and like I said about this bishop b5 idea, just clamping down, pressuring this, and just eyeing this square to transfer a piece in there. Sorry, I'm a little bit allergic right now, but knight d5 tries to do that. Rook c1, and now I go in, and the reason why this is not too great is because this pawn doesn't really do a whole lot to stop white's sort of plans. This pawn isn't really stopping the development of any piece. The only thing it's really stopping is this pawn from going up, which wasn't even sure if white wanted to do in the first place. So that is kind of an inaccurate transformation of the position. So knight to h2. And now we have e4. I'm trying to just crack things open. I just tried to take and draw the king out. And my idea was to go here, because obviously you cannot take this. Because if you take it, this comes in, and you are completely winning. So obviously white doesn't take it because they're like a 1300. And I take the pawn, there, takes, and a tactic is about to arise. Knight to d4, eyeing the square, eyeing the bishop. And my opponent makes a blunder. Bishop to e4. And like in the last game, there was a deflection sacrifice. In this game, there was a mighty attraction sacrifice. Queen takes c1. Because the point of this is to force the queen to take, clearing up to e2 fork and picking up the queen. A beautiful tactic, if I do say so myself. I am quite impressed with myself that I found that. So bishop, I mean, that's why I put it in this video. I mean, it's like what I thought impressive at the time. Rook to e8, right after the bishop attacks the rook. Attacking the rook, like, my opponent's just like, oh god, I just got absolutely killed with that tactic, so now I just have to me attack a rook. Like, they're kind of shook right now, if you know what I mean. Didn't mean to rhyme there. Rook takes c2, I'm just mopping up the pawns. I don't exactly know why I didn't take this. Maybe I was just so hyped that I wasn't thinking clearly after landing that tactic. Rook to b2, king f8. I really don't know what my refusal to take this is. I'm just like, oh, I don't have to take. I'm just going to move my king in here. King f1, and now I finally take. And my opponent throws in the towel. And folks, those were my best games of 2022 that I thought the most impressive, and I will see you in the next video with my best games from 2023 to finish off the 21st birthday special, and then the next video after that, which will be the disastrous chess game played between my sisters right after we all started learning chess. All right, I have been the amazing Haley, the gender fluid chess teacher, and I will see you next time.